welcome everybody to another edition of the Orange Bloods Modcast. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined by Anwar, Alex, Jason. We can't even have the entire Orange Blood staff on the Modcast anymore because there'd just be too many voices, too many faces. So we'll stick to tried and true. Fellas, we're basically 24 hours away from the start of the Texas football season. It begins tomorrow. We record this on Thursday morning. Friday is the start of practices. We're going to get a chance to see this team a little bit through the first 3 practices. So, it's funny. There's been so much conversation about recruiting, and I think a lot of the conversation in this podcast, this modcast rather, will be 100% focused on kind of a fall football preview. So, Alex, I'll come to you first. Tomorrow, the number one thing that you want to see most on the first day of practice is what?
Oh man, well, everything.
That's why I asked you. You only get to pick one.
Anwar always comes up to me before practice and says, like, let's figure out what we're going to focus on and what we're going to write about. And I'm just like, get out of here. I'm like, I'm watching everything. But I think that believe it or not, I'll bring Anwar just back into it. And I know this is generally his deal because Anwar loves playing the hits. And it's always the quarterbacks, right, that people are most interested in. And there will be, these last few years, I've just been like, well, I know what Sam Ehlinger looks like. I know what the competition behind him looks like. I know how this story ends. So, I'm going to want to look at what the offensive line groupings are. I'm going to want to look at who's first up at the, whatever spot that's sort of up for grabs. But this year, I really do. Like, I'll probably be standing over there with Anwar looking at the quarterbacks a little bit. Trying to just figure out, how things look a little, how things look as compared to spring football. If there's separation there, if it's closer, if it's like just kind of getting an idea of where that quarterback competition stands between Casey Thompson and Hudson Card as we get this thing kicked off. What about you, Anwar? Is it as simple as play the hits?
No, I mean, I'll play the hits clearly, right? But I think for me, I'm really curious about these linebackers. Like, I mean, there was what have like 12, 18 guys transfer in. I mean, I'm joking, but that was clearly an area that this staff felt was an area of weakness, and they went out and loaded up as much as they could. So I just kind of want to see what that group looks like. You hear about guys and what they've contributed, and we've heard that about that from other players, but that linebacker group, since it was such a concern from the staff, I'm kind of curious to see what these new guys look like.
Jason, same question. We'll just finish up going around the room here. Just opening day, is there anything that you'd rather see more than anything else? If you could just be plopped down in one spot and focus on that thing?
Yeah, I would love to be creative and say, it'll be defensive backs or the coaching interactions. It's going to be quarterbacks. I mean, come on, we're all going to be watching the quarterbacks probably 90% of the time. So the story of the camp is going to be who's going to be the starting quarterback. Is there going to be any separation early on? We get to watch the early portion of 3 practices. I don't know that we're going to see what we visually will see. May not tell us a whole lot, but hearing how those quarterbacks perform over the course of the entire practice will be important. But quarterbacks, Anwar mentioned linebackers and transfers specifically. I mean, you got a transfer running back. How are they going to work him in with guys like Bijan and Roschon Johnson? So there's a lot of different storylines on how's the offensive line. I know Alex will follow that closely. How's the offensive line going to come together? But ultimately, it's going to come back to quarterbacks, man. That's where my camera is going to be pointed 90% of the time.
I can't lie. The quarterback thing is so obvious, but I'm kind of dying to see Xavier Worthy. I want to see, in retrospect, we're talking about a guy that is the second highest rated guy in the entire recruiting class behind Jatavian Sanders. And in a world where he's a normal recruit, right? So we'd
all be talking about him for 6 months.
Or 12, right?
Yeah. Instead, it's like we just started hearing about him really, 2-3 weeks ago, probably.
I think most members of the Texas football fan base don't even know that he's a player that exists, right? I mean, if you're on Orange Blood, you do.
Sure.
But I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about if 100,000 people show up for Louisiana for the first game of the season, I bet 50,000 plus have no idea who his name is.
They'll be looking at the roster. Who's this walk-on? Where's he from?
Exactly. Who's this kid? Or you'll have people at DKR who were like, hey, keep an eye on this guy. He's the one that you want to watch. That we didn't get a chance to see him in the spring, which is slightly different than almost everybody else in the program, with the exception of just a few transfers. He is a complete unknown. And to have everybody all off season during the summer mention him as a name was one thing. Anwar and I were talking about this though on Sunday when after we'd done the first Jordan Whittington interview. And I was like, most wide receivers, they don't like to give credit to other receivers. Yeah. I think Anwar's exact comment was they like to keep the shine on them. And for him to point out, he knew he was going to be asked about guys, right? He knew this recording was coming. It wasn't a small thing for me that he mentioned, hey, first guy straight out the gate is Xavier Worthy. That guy's going to be incredible. He could have just as easily said his best friend on the team, whoever that might be. That he went with such a young player made it really hard for me to think about anybody else.
That's fair, Catch. I mean, and there's a lot of hype about him. And, it's usually when it comes to freshmen, right? That's just not what you hear. Like we heard a little bit with Troy O'Meary, last year, but he was balling at that point. For him to be coming in and Jason, who's the guy who covered him in recruiting, knows about that speed that he has, and Sarkisian's desire to have burners, to have playmakers, to not have long scoring drives, but to have explosive plays. Like that's his thing. And to know that Xavier Worthy kind of checks all the boxes for Sarkisian. You're right. That is definitely a guy. Good call on your behalf. That's definitely a guy worth watching.
Sweet. That was like me saying earlier this week with the Billy Lucci video that I was going to confess that I was wrong. We're 5 minutes into the video and you gave me an attaboy. I feel like
wonders never cease. I mean, you confessed you were wrong for the first time in your life, and I gave you props. Like it was
what an upside down world we're living in. Yeah,
I know. Cats living with dogs. It really is. So, should we do this now? Like, at some point in this modcast, we're gonna do the thing that I said we were going to do a couple of weeks ago. Is we're going to officially name who we're president of the fan club. Because I feel like we've each got like 10 fan clubs that we want to be the president of, and there's some crossover. So I feel like we all need to declare before the first practice who we're adopting as, and a couple of us I'm sure are already, if Alex maintains that he continues to be the Casey Thompson fan club president, we're into multiple years of residency as the president of the fan club. But let's just do it now. And Jason, I have no idea who you're going to pick. So I'm going to you first.
Are there any players that are off limits?
Nobody's off limits.
Bijan, right? And Bijan off limits.
That's too easy.
It is too easy. But if he wants to pick Bijan and get called out for taking the easy pick, I'm giving him the entire board.
Well, man, I wasn't expecting this question. I'd kind of put it out of sight, out of mind from a few weeks ago. You mentioned when this few weeks ago, and you said, hey, we'll do this. You said, hey, Jason may pick Sark. And probably a few weeks ago, I probably would have picked Sark. I mean, I've said it on our message board on Orange Bloods. I've said it on our podcast. Hey, I think he was a home run hire. He was the guy I thought they should have hired before they hired him. I was like, oh, go get Sark. I don't think I'm going that direction though, man. Recruiting the last few weeks has kind of thrown me for a loop there. I still think X's and O's. I think Sark's as good as there is in college football. I think that recruiting will come around, but they're taking some hits here the last month or so, I guess, that have, given me a little reason for pause. I'm not going to go Bijan. That's too easy. I'm going to come right back to the guy we just talked about, Catch. I mean, Xavier Worthy, to steal your thunder a little bit, you've got Jordan Whittington talking about him. I mean, at Big 12 Media Days, people had talked about him. Behind the scenes, people had talked about him. When he committed to Texas, I think when I wrote it up, and it was a short write-up because he didn't really talk to media much, and that whole situation with him signing with Michigan and then being let out of his letter of intent, it all happened pretty quickly. and pretty quietly, honestly. I mean, neither Xavier nor people close to him really communicated much. So, again, he flew under the radar, but when he committed, my write-up and on the board was like, this is exactly the kind of guy Steve Sarkisian needs in his offense. I said the same thing about Evan Stewart in this upcoming class. He needs his speed playmakers that can score from anywhere on the field. We saw what he's done with it at Alabama, of course. So, I'm usually the guy saying, hey, slow down. I mean, you guys, everybody who's listening to our podcast knows it. I'm slow down on Colin Johnson, slow down on Casey Thompson. I got to see it in a few games before usually I'm ready to fully buy in. But when I factor in this offense, Sark's history with players of this skill set, in the things we've heard from multiple people, I'm going Xavier Worthy is my guy that I'm buying stock in. And you know what? He's a freshman. Even that makes it even better.
It's okay. You didn't steal my pick. So you didn't hurt me.
Damn it.
But I am surprised that you went. Is it
goes against my
Worthy? Did I talk you into it?
Yeah, you kind of set him up on a tee for me. But yeah, it goes against my normal persona. I'm usually the guy who'd be like, no, I'm going to take a junior who's played for 2 years. But I think the best talent on this team. I mean, we mentioned Bijan. I mean, and I don't know if I'm going to. I mean, I think Alfred Collins. I mean, I think the best talent is young talent on this team. It's just you got to pick the right guy. But I think when I factor in again the offense, what Sark's going to do with these guys, get them in space, I think Xavier Worthy is a pretty safe bet to be a guy that's going to start for this team for years to come.
Well, stay tuned, Jason. You may get to learn what the sound of his voice sounds like yet. Alex, is it as easy? You're not breaking brand, are you?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I think I've made my stance is clear on Casey Thompson, right? I mean, do I even need to declare myself the president of his fan club?
Well, you are. And the issue is, do you want to give that position to somebody else because there's somebody else that you want to pick, or are you just sticking with Casey Thompson?
It's hard, man, because you just look at it's hard for me because you look at who Keandre Coburn is and what he's been able to do and just the force he is in the middle. I don't think he's going to be at Texas much longer. I think that as good as people think he is, he's still underrated with just these last 2 years, the number of run stuffs that he's been able to generate while also just, missing, so few tackles and just being such a cog right there in the middle. I mean, NFL types recognize him. He's impossible not to recognize. So it's hard. Choosing between Casey Thompson and Keandre Coburn for me is really, really hard. But if I'm gonna have to give up the mantle to let Coburn have it, I got to give up all my Casey Thompson cred to do it. There's no way. I'm sticking with Casey Thompson, but let it be known that Keandre Coburn makes that really hard for me.
What if Xavier Worthy had still been on the board? No.
I haven't seen Xavier Worthy live yet, so
okay.
I'm just like, I'm not going to go out on that.
This almost isn't a fair question to ask you. Then you want to see him live before you can.
Hold on, he just said he's not going to go on that kind of limb. You did that with Casey Thompson.
I saw him live.
You've been on that limb for a lot longer than he's been playing.
It was the first live practice I saw. Who knows?
I guess that's true. You did see him at practice.
I could switch to Xavier Worthy at like 7:30 p.m. tomorrow night.
Yeah, Friday night. Yeah, all right.
Well, look, let's just go ahead and before Anwar potentially steals my thunder. I'm still team Hudson Card. So 2 of the 4 of us have quarterbacks that were presidents of the fan club on, and I think it's going to be a fascinating battle. I thought it was really interesting that Jordan Whittington was, I thought he was genuine in saying that he thought it was really close. And, I think that it speaks to a spring that ended without anything being clear cut. And I think coming into the fall, I think there's definitely, I wonder what Hudson Card and his group would think about what his chances are, and kind of the same about Casey Thompson. I'm sure there's confidence, but I'm also have to believe there's a little bit of doubt in the sense that there's unknown going into the rest of this month and what exactly is going to happen. We've been guessing about what Sark will do from the moment he was hired. How does he handle this? Because I know Anwar will tell us that if Card was named the starter the Tuesday before the opener, Thompson would be in the portal in no time, right? Do you still feel that way, Anwar?
Yeah, I still feel pretty confident on that.
So I think we sense that Card won't do the opposite. I mean, he just got into the Texas Business School. He seems very content to be at Texas, but it's still a tricky, it's the call that will define, I think, potentially the first couple of years of the Sark era. It could be the call that defines this season, a season that could be, it may be too late to save 2022 on a massive scale. So you got to be able to save 2023 on a massive scale and keep the Arch Mannings of the world fully dialed in. And this decision, which would be between two guys that are both good enough that Alex and I both are comfortable being and like want to be the president of their fan club, giddy up. Let's do this thing. Let's find out what the hell happens. Because I really do want to see what each of these quarterbacks looks like in a game setting in a Steve Sarkisian offense. Anwar, I had to grab Hudson in the event that you did it in front of me.
Nah.
Okay. So who's your guy?
Simplistic. I'm going to go off. I'm going different. I'm going Deshaun Jameson. That's going to be my guy. I'll be president of his fan club. I think the dual threat that he adds from a cornerback position to a return position is totally invaluable. When we think about the games that he pretty much saved Texas in last year, single-handedly, right? When it was just about done, especially think about that Oklahoma State game. I mean, the average catch, I was looking up, he averaged like 31 yards on kickoffs. I think it says he's has the third most return yardage in school history already. So that guy ends up being the guy for me that I would be president of his fan club. So I was close between him and Jordan, but I'm gonna go with Deshaun.
Fair enough.
Good pick, Anwar. I like that pick. I would have probably gone, if I'm taking pound for pound talent, that probably would be my pick. When I factored in the freshman elements, if I'm buying stock, I factor in the freshman element. That's why I'd go with Worthy. But I do, as far as pound for pound talent for this year, that's a great pick.
I was just going to say real quick, Alex kind of told us his number 2 would have been Coburn, that it came down to a Coburn, Casey Thompson. Alex, what about you? I mean, Jason, what about you? Is that it? Would Jameson be your number 2?
Well, I'll take him off the board since Almar picked him. I'll go with Collins. I think as a freshman defensive lineman last year, what he flashed, again, I'm buying low, I guess, with some of these young players, but I think Alfred Collins is going to be a star in the making at some point too. So he'd probably be my second pick.
What about you, Anwar?
It would be Whittington. I think it's easy to overlook him when we talk about the Xavier Worthies of the world, but I mean, we still know for sure that he's going to be a starter in this offense, and we know what receivers in the Sarkisian offense can do. So, I mean, it was 1A and 1B for me, but we know what Jordan Whittington can be when healthy, and if he is healthy, like he might be that breakout candidate.
It's funny if all of those guys are off the table, because I was going to say Alfred Collins.
Got to go Bijan. Somebody's got to go Bijan, right?
I think we all realize that Bijan doesn't need a president.
Yeah.
About midway through Ricky Williams' senior season, whoever would have originally been the Ricky Williams president of the fan club, he just get out of the way. That thing was on complete self-control at some point. I think Bijan's reached that level. Alex, I want to ask you a question, because Anwar and I talked a little bit about this yesterday on the phone. DeMarvion Overshown. What are we expecting from him this year? It is, I feel like that injury somewhat, if he's not coming off of an injury that causes us to miss the spring, I feel like his overall platform would have been higher. I think we'd still be talking about a guy that at linebacker really started to show signs at various points last season that he could be the kind of playmaker that you have to have more of on the field. They did bring in Devin Richardson. They are similar-ish type athletic talents with skill sets. What are you from a DeMarvion Overshown standpoint? I'm asking you this question because I haven't figured out who my number 2 guy is. But Overshown feels like somebody on the defense that has become the overlooked man a little bit. And I don't know if that would have been the case in a world where he's here for the spring and he doesn't just kind of disappear for a few months, with all due respect to an active social media feed.
Right. Yes. He's always been there on Twitter, right? He didn't ever leave there. Look, man, I think with Overshown, one of the most productive players on the whole defense last year. Of course, Joseph Osai, Joseph Osai kind of had everybody in his shadow last year as far as production, but DeMarvion Overshown up there, and as far as like the top 3 overall guys, I mean, he did play 592 snaps last season. So among the snap leaders on defense, I think he played the most snaps he played even more snaps than these DBs, which is, he never came off the field. And so he's a big time leader on the defense. I think what you can expect to see from him is him flying to the football like he does, getting sideline to sideline, prowling like he does, probably missing a few more tackles than you would like. He'll probably have the second most missed tackles on the team. That's if BJ Foster starts. If BJ Foster doesn't start, I would bet my bottom dollar that DeMarvion Overshown will miss the most tackles. And that's not to say he's a bad tackler. It's just to say, like, he flies to the foot. He's always around the football. And, there'd be sometimes where he'll get to a spot where he's engaging a ball carrier to where you would have never expected him to make it there or even get that far. So he won't come in with the correct leverage and he won't be able to get his head across. But he'll always be around the football. He'll fly from place to place. He'll line up on the weak side of the inside linebacker positions. We'll see him in overhang capacity. We'll see him in coverage. He's a great do-it-all player. We talked about it last year. There was only a few players on this defense that we would allow in our, what do we call it, Catch, like the trust tree or the circle of trust or what, Jesus. I mean, DeMarvion Overshown, but it was one of the first guys you would welcome up in there.
Hey, real quick, remind us who's on the tree that comes back.
Oh, well, Keandre Coburn's on the tree. Tavondre Sweat is on the tree. Definitely, in a weird way, Jacoby Jones is kind of I welcome in my trust tree. He was, I mean, he's kind of, if you just, he doesn't jump off the page or anything like that, but just from an efficiency standpoint, I'm looking at it now. One of the more efficient players on a per snap basis last season. And then I would say maybe we can start considering Alfred Collins. Alfred Collins only
damn right you can, Alex.
Yeah, only 241 snaps last year, but he created this. he created production at a similar clip to Tavondre Sweat, who played 306 snaps, 8.11 and 8.24 snaps per production caused last season. The only thing separating those two guys. So I think if you're considering Sweat, who I think that we need to, you need to consider Alfred Collins as well. So on defense, I would say, just to recap, Jacoby Jones, certainly Deshaun Jameson. I'm not sure I'm willing to put any of those safeties in there just yet. And then with the linebacker, DeMarvion Overshown, with, Devin Richardson, certainly a dude who I would love to, but I need to see him live first. And then along the defensive line, Jacoby Jones, Tavondre Sweat, Keandre Coburn, and Alfred Collins.
What about Moro Ojomo?
He's not welcome in my trust tree just yet.
Okay. Fair enough. I just had to ask the question. A lot of people are talking about Moro Ojomo as a double-digit sack guy, and I just don't know where that's coming from.
Hey, do you know what? It could be some of the stuff clouding my mind from last season when he was playing out of position. He doesn't have the frame to be able to bend the edge, and so maybe we could see him get back to the form that. I mean, I know Dustin was just such a Moro Ojomo truther coming in, but he liked him at a 3 technique or at a 4 or 4-eye, and I don't think he was as successful being out wide at a 5 technique and out wide from there.
Poor Dustin's not here. He would have already claimed Moro Ojomo as that's his fan club presidency. I think I'll go DeMarvion. I think that he's an easy guy this year to, if he's an easy guy to root for, because we know what a big season would just mean for him. Like, this is a guy that I think shoulders a lot of responsibility, that, he kind of thinks of himself a little bit as a man of the household, and, a big season propelling him to a healthy place in the NFL draft, I think is an easy thing to root for. Alex, how on the cusp do you think he is before we move on? I have a question I want to ask Anwar, but on the Overshown side of things, he's how close? If there are no issues with the labrum, he comes back fully healthy, he jumps into this Kwiatkowski defense and immediately finds his place. From a playmaking and everything else needed, how close is he to being, a legitimate top 4 round guy in the NFL?
Oh, yeah. I mean, very close.
Very
close. Yeah, dude. For sure. I mean, you've seen him play, bro. I mean, you've seen how fast he is, and it's like how big he is. And
if he comes out last year, where does he go?
If he comes out last, I mean, I think he gets drafted. I think maybe he gets drafted. I think he's really close to being a top 4 round guy, especially given the void. I don't know if we get to talking about what's going to happen with the edge. Like, to me, if we're not talking quarterback, that was what I was going to say was my biggest thing. I was going to watch is who is going to, are they going to still keep on rolling out Ray Thornton at that edge spot? I mean, I really want to see Ovie. Like, I want to see how, like, guys like Prince Dorba look after, a summertime. Are they going to run Jatavion Sanders out there at tight end? Are they going to run him out at edge? Like, so at the edge right there, we have so many question marks, right? Like I keep on talking about, it's a Joseph Osai-sized hole, and nobody has looked good. So, with that being the case, if that were to continue, I think it opens up so many more things for DeMarvion Overshown to maybe make some plays that we wouldn't be expecting of him, that they could get him, get him lined up, not in an edge capacity, but like I said, sometimes in an overhead capacity. You can have that guy knife off the edge, maybe make some plays in the backfield. I think he could do some splashy stuff that maybe we didn't see quite as much last season. So yeah, dude, I think that the sky's the limit for him, and top 4 rounds. I think we should probably come into this season. I mean, I don't know if it's a hot take. I mean, I think that should be the expectation for him. Anything less would feel a little bit like a disappointment, at least to me.
Anwar, Alex brings up the pass rush, and it feels like we could slide into there and not come back, because it's a conversation we've had all year long. Don't feel like we've talked about the safeties. So Alex, I'm going to come back to the pass rush. It's weird. I was looking at Alex's depth chart just this week from the defensive side of the ball, and it was hard not to notice that I'm not overly jacked up about the safety options right now. I mean, there's a part of me that wonders, can one of these other corners step up, and would Josh Thompson be a guy that they could slide over? Like, I'm trying to figure out who their best 5 guys are in theory to get on the field all at one time, and maybe you could be creative in moving them around. I don't know what to think about that position. And if your defense is as good as the spine, right? So the middle part of your defensive line, the middle part of your linebacking core, and then, who's that last line of defense at safety? Who makes up the spine of this Texas defense? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm looking at so as you were talking, I pulled up Alex's depth chart. So you've got, which crazy, Alex, you have Brendan Schooler at 1 and Jaron Thompson at the other, with BJ Foster as a backup.
Well, I think that I was thinking about making it Jaron or BJ, but just based on the spring game, I mean, BJ Foster was with the 2s. I mean, I've heard behind the scenes, and maybe we'll see at fall camp tomorrow that it'll be Schooler and BJ. But from what I've heard from one source who I talked to, I said, well, do you want me, who was critiquing the chart? I said, well, what do you want me to get BJ you want me to get BJ ahead of Schooler after you guys just had Schooler playing ahead of BJ in the spring game? They were like, no, but maybe you could have him over Jaron Thompson. So I don't know. It feels like they really like Schooler. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that I don't think it's an absolute that BJ Foster doesn't start, but I mean, I think it was kind of telling that he didn't receive a single rep with the ones during the spring game.
Yeah, it's interesting too because Tyler Owens is a guy that came in with a lot of hype and expectations, and and again, Alex's projected depth charts have as a backup, and not saying he hasn't been a backup. So it is interesting because we know Schooler did play DB previously in a previous life in college football, and so he has some experience there. It'd be interesting. He's been a jack of all trades, master of none so far. And so I don't know what to make of him. At that safety position, he did make some plays in the spring game. Jaron Thompson's the guy that I think they all love and all believe in. But yeah, there is an unknown commodity catch to the point that you're getting at. There's an unknown commodity here where Schooler, I don't know. Jaron Thompson, kind of potentially believe in. BJ Foster's fascinating because you would think at this stage of his career he would be further along, and it's just not for whatever reasons. And I mean, I don't know what this. Again, Alex has a snap count and from last year, but I know it had to be pretty high for his contributions. So a lot of question marks for me, Ketch. A lot of question marks back there.
What is everybody's biggest question mark going into camp? I mean, there's a lot of them. So, Alex, it could be as easy as the pass rush. I mean, that is tried and true. Who replaces Joseph Osai? But Jason, I'll start with you. The scariest thing about this team.
The scariest thing that like you said, there are a lot of scary things. That's the scariest thing. I mean, I could probably rattle off 5 or 6 things that I think are worrisome. Again, I mean, I'll pick the low-hanging fruit, but the quarterback situation is the scariest thing. I think both guys are talented, of course, but neither one has ever started a college football game. Casey Thompson's played about a half of football minus some mop-up duty. Hudson's come in and handed the ball off a couple times, thrown a couple passes. I mean, listen, man, whoever the quarterback is, the starter is going to take some lumps this year. And I don't know that there's enough talent around them where you can absorb those lumps comfortably. If you just had a flat out dominant defense or a ground game, an offensive line that's going to just pound every opponent for 60 minutes, then maybe, you can kind of cover up some quarterback deficiencies if there are some. But to me, that's worrisome. When y'all were talking quarterbacks earlier, you and Alex, in my mind, I was thinking, okay, whoever wins the job, and I'd be curious to hear your take, Ketch and Alex. I mean, I don't think whoever wins the job is the starter long-term, maybe, should I say. I think be it injury or be it, hey, they're going to have a couple rough stretches where they're going to have to put the other guy in and try him to see if he can maybe catch lightning in a bottle. I think you're going to see both quarterbacks play. And I know Sark said he wants to have a quarterback named late in fall camp. I'm not fully convinced both guys don't play in the opener just to see who plays better and see what they've got.
That would be
it's not ideal, is it, Alex? But I just don't know that either guy's going to separate from the other. I mean, again, I could probably talk offensive line. We talk pass rush, back end, linebacker depth. There's a lot of issues. And to me, that is an issue. But if I'm picking one, it's the inexperience at quarterback play is the most alarming thing for me.
Anwar, what about you?
It's offensive line. I mean, I probably took Alex's thing right there, but there's a lot of questions. I mean, again, we think, Christian Jones is going to be pretty good. And then I'm not quite sure what to make of the everybody else on there, whether it's, Oghoufo, who's, a 6-year senior, Jake Majors, Angalau, Kerstetter. Like, I just don't know what to make of what that combo looks like. I maintain, and Ketch, you and I maintain that we really thought that they should bring in some offensive linemen through the transfer portal this offseason. They did not. And they didn't seem to be too worried about where that offensive line was. But I've been around here way too long at this point to know what it looks like if you don't have a good offensive line. And that's my biggest concern.
Alex, you going pass rush?
No. I mean, I feel like pass rush is one, but I mean, the thing that I'm most interested in is offensive line stuff, and just specifically now that, so, okay, during fall camp, during spring ball, we had Derek Kerstetter, who had basically all but returned. We had heard from practices that he was out there. He was running, he was cutting, he was doing everything. He was even lining up with the offensive line in various like non-contact and 3/4 speed drills, right? So he's ready to go. He's healthy, so he's back, right? Now what happens with the offensive line? Because you're gonna have Christian Jones at left guard or left tackle, Denzel Okafor. Even though I don't think that he should be just a complete lock to start. Feels like he is based on the messaging we're hearing sort of behind the scenes from this from this staff. You have center. So does that stay with Jake Majors, who was really good last year when Kerstetter was out, or does Kerstetter go back to center? Because if Kerstetter doesn't go back to center, Kerstetter has to go to the right tackle on the other side of Junior Angelau, who's locked in at right guard, right? And so if he gets kicked out to right tackle, that kicks out Andre Carrick, who was also really good last year whenever he got a chance to play. I thought that lineup that had Carrick and Jake Majors on it was as good or better of a lineup than what they had previously. So Kerstetter coming back and where he lines up, I think it'll probably be at center. But, displacing a guy like Jake Majors, to me, man, that feels really tough. And whenever you just look at it, and I know if Jake Majors and Denzel Okafor both walk into an alleyway, Denzel Okafor is the one that you're going to be running away from, right? I mean, it's like if you just look at their bodies and sort of look at these two guys, Denzel Okafor looks a lot more like the guy that Coach Flood would have maybe coached that body type at Alabama, right? But Okafor just last season, he allowed disruption on once every 16.9 snaps, which out of the last, 50, so basically 55 offensive linemen during the time that I've been doing this, that I've recorded every snap that they've played at Texas. Denzel Okafor's senior season playing guard last year, allowing snaps once every 16.9, or allowing disruption or committing a penalty once every 16.9 snaps. There's only been 3 worse seasons by any of these guys. 2 of them were when Tristan Nicholson was really struggling over at the right tackle in those years. And then the other one was Cameron Hughes' sophomore season, where he played 437 snaps. He allowed disruption once every 12.9 snaps, which is so Cameron Hughes had a bad sophomore year. But Denzel Okafor had a bad senior year, man. So hopefully he can take a step. It feels like he's a locked in starter. So I think a really good young player in Jake Majors or Andre Carrick could possibly be relegated to sort of being the 6th man up. Carrick in more of a swing tackle capacity. Majors is more of a guy who could play center or either of the guard positions. I'm not sure that I think that that's the best use of resources. So let's see how Okafor looks, if he is improving, if Kyle Flood can work a little bit of magic there. And then sadly, one of these guys likely is going to be sort of left out of the rotation. And I guess you might say that, if you're looking at it from a pure depth perspective, it's probably good, that you have that guy from a pure perspective of optimizing who might be the best grouping of 5 personnel wise. I have some worries there with that, but it'll certainly be interesting to see. I have no idea when we get there tomorrow what the group will look like now that we have Derek Kerstetter back.
I'll go pass rush, and I'll just mention that towards the end of last year, it was a whole lot of Joseph Osai and Jet Bush being asked to come off the edge on passing downs, and that that usually meant that it was either coming from one player or nobody at all. I just don't know who's getting to the quarterback for this team. And if you've got a defense in the Big 12 that can't create pressure, you're going to give up a lot of points. I mean, it's kind of as simple as that. The ability to apply pressure and get in the backfield just in general, historically in the Big 12 has been more important than just being stout, like the biggest, strongest, toughest defenses. Oklahoma State's won conference championships when their defense has been opportunistic, when they create plays. It's not because they've got the best yardage per game, and it's not because their third down efficiency is the best. It's because they're forcing interceptions, they're getting sacks, they're creating big plays. And I look at this Texas defense under Pete Kwiatkowski, and it doesn't. Alex, when we talk about the trust tree, if there was a trust playmaking tree, so just forget about being good players, but actual playmakers on this team. Overshown is in, and I don't know who else. I don't know that I can call Keandre Coburn a playmaker, even if he's the best player on this defense.
He's a play killer. He's a play killer.
Probably a good way to describe him.
Yeah, James. I think Deshaun Jameson's a play. He gets the ball in his hands and he makes plays. It's just a matter of him being in the right place at the right time. I'd like to maybe look back and see what his statistics were last season for the passes defensed and stuff like that. It doesn't seem like he was always a guy who was always around the football. Let me just look at that real quick. So Deshaun Jameson last year targeted, he was thrown at 36 times. He allowed 18 completions. He had so Deshaun Jameson didn't have a pick last season.
I don't think so.
Is that right? Do I have that right? Yeah, four burns. So yeah, it's like he gets the football. If he gets the football in his hands, he's going to be a danger. So I think that you could maybe consider him as a hypothetical playmaker. If he can get around the football a little bit more this year. But I think you're right. Besides Overshown,
I think you also have to factor in that they're going to be a little more exotic this year. And even in talking to recruits and what these coaches are telling recruits last week on campus, they're telling, hey, watch Jameson, watch our safeties, what we're going to do with these guys and how we're going to get them in the backfield and things like that. So, we may be being for a few surprise names. It's,
I owe Jameson a little bit of an apology though, because he did lead all the cornerbacks in pass breakups last year. So he was definitely.
So we got Overshown and Jameson on the playmaking trust tree.
Yeah.
But, I think there's a lot of guys on this defense we'd like to put on the trust tree. They just haven't proven it yet. Someone's got to rush the quarterback. It's tough being a really good major college defense and not having a bona fide threat as pass rusher. Whatever Texas was on.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Well, what do you think about Ovie? Have you watched him a lot? Because to me, it's like, and then also, do you I was just looking on the Texas roster to see if they've updated it. They need to get it updated with some of these new numbers of these new guys so we can start figuring that out enough to, scramble around tomorrow to figure out who everybody is. But I was just interested to see where they have Jatavion Sanders listed. That's another thing. Is he going to be a tight end or is he going to be an edge or where's that guy going to be? That's a big thing to watch.
He's going to be a tight end for to start off.
Jesus, how many tight ends do you need? You're going to run four tight end sets every time?
Hey, I agree. And I think if there's money to be made for him someday, I think it's at defensive end but they're going to start him off at tight end. That's what he wants. And that's what they're telling people.
I guess with the pass rush catch, what I'm thinking is geez, man, I'm starting to be trying to fall in love with the mystery of the unknown. It's like I'm just trying to go with the devil I don't know instead of the devil I do. Do you think that a guy like Ovie could come in? I'm just calling him by his first name because I don't know how to pronounce his last name yet. Do you know? I don't know how to pronounce it. But
Anwar, you want to take a swing?
Oghoufo.
Ovie Oghoufo. Yeah. Do you have thoughts about? It doesn't seem like it should be that hard to come in and look that much better than Thornton or these Jet Bush and stuff.
His thing is at Notre Dame, he was just more of a consistently good player. He didn't always flash, I think, plus pass rushing skills. But when you watch that guy's practice film at Notre Dame, he looked much more explosive than I thought we'd seen at times during the games. I don't know if that means he's been given some responsibilities where they're not asking him to just pin his ears back and go. I think he's of the guys on the team, he's the guy that I think can get to a half dozen. I don't think they've got a double-digit guy, but I think he's a guy that once every other week is going to get to the quarterback potentially and get him down. If you had 5 of those guys, you'd be okay, right? I don't know who the next guy is that I would say I think can get to 6 is kind of my problem. I think somebody's going to get their hands on some sacks, and I think Ovie has a profile of a guy that can get there. but I don't know who else. I really don't. I think the everybody will lean into the fact, to the point of Jason just made, that Kwiatkowski's scheme may be the thing that creates pressure for this defense, and that we may see all of this data spread across to various guys who we wouldn't think is traditional pass rushers, or that rush getting from that position. But, Jimmy Johnson once said it's about the Jimmies and the Joes and not the X's and the O's. And if that's true, then I don't know who the Jimmies and the Joes are. Because I know last season when we watched them, the answer was really nobody. If Joseph Osai didn't show up, that pass rush was pretty non-existent. And, then you're having to rob Peter to pay Paul to get there. And good coaches and good offenses with good quarterbacks can often take advantage of having to rob Peter to pay Paul just to get to the quarterback. I'm looking at the clock. Why don't we jump into parting shots? Try to keep this thing less than 2 hours, although we're doing a pretty good job at that. Anybody got a parting shot ready to go? I know I don't want to catch anybody completely off guard. Anybody got a rant? No.
I don't have any.
It's because we're gonna get to watch practice for the first 3 days on War, at least a little bit. That Alex isn't going off.
Hey, I'll just ask you guys something, a personal thing for my parting shot. So let me hear what you guys would. It's a parenting question. I want to hear what you guys would do. I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place here, and I'm gonna have to make a decision in the next hour about what I'm going to do about this. All right.
Well, we're the guys to come to.
Okay, so my daughter yesterday, who I feel like is 6 years old, is usually super mature for her age, and very, of course I dote over her like crazy and think she's perfect, of course, as we all do, our baby daughters. But yesterday she was
not always, but I got 3 of them. Not always, trust me.
Jason's ready to take the question.
Yesterday she was with her mom up at the feed store up at the corner, because we had to go up there and get some dog food, and it's a kind of country like feed store, right? And so in there they have dogs that are like just inside the store running around. They're like store dogs or whatever. One of these dogs was like a kind of an oversized, but still like a puppy, right? A little puppy. We have a dog here at our house who's an old dog who is not very rambunctious and is not very, doesn't do much, right? But this little puppy runs out, sees, puppies love kids, right? So the puppy runs out, jumps up on my daughter, does the stuff where he's kind of trying to mouth on her, you know how puppies do, kind of trying to mouth on her arm and stuff like that. Just do a little playing. Apparently my daughter really freaks out about this and acts really scared that the dog's trying to attack her and all this stuff. My wife was like, hey, chill out. Like, that's a little puppy, try and pet it. But she was scared and freaked out, about this puppy. I tried to talk to her about it last night. She didn't want to talk about it, all this stuff. And so I just told her, I said, tomorrow we're going back up to the feed store and we're going to go pet that damn puppy, and we're going to get you used to being around puppies. And because here's the thing, if you have that kind of reaction so you go to your friend's house and soon you're going to have sleepovers and stuff like that, you've never been around these puppies. Like, if a puppy wants to jump up on you and play, you can't scream and cry about it and want to go get an adult and stuff. You need to know how to handle that kind of situation. And I could tell this morning she was kind of a little bit even dreading it. You know how kids, they worry about stuff. So what would you guys do? Would you take her back up there to go play with the puppy? Or would you just let it slip? It feels like you shouldn't be freaked out about a puppy.
Well, we've got a puppy in our house, and he will be a year this month, and he kind of does what you're talking about, Alex. And my kids think it's cute, and I always tell them, like, hey, don't encourage him to, like you said, he's not biting, but he kind of mouths on him and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But because I said, hey, if he does that to the wrong person, a kid that's we don't know or something like that, I mean, it could be bad. But yeah, man, I don't think there's anything wrong if you're taking your daughter up there. I mean, you can't just it's not like you're throwing into the deep end of the pool and saying sink or swim. I mean, so if you gently,
I kind of wanted to get down with her.
Yeah, man.
Pet the puppy and stuff like that. I'm just wondering if that's something she's going to look back at and be like, my dad, man, I was scared to hell of this dog. My dad took me up there and made me see the dog.
So Alex, one of our sponsors, or at least my sponsor, The Loewy Law Firm, Adam Loewy.
Oh God.
Adam Loewy is one of the top personal injury lawyers in Austin. Adam is a proud graduate of the University of Texas Law School and started his law firm in 2005.
The dude
Adam
has a
helps
billboard
people who
basically
have
on
been
top of the
injured
feed store.
in car crashes, slips and falls, dog bites, and other assorted ways. So Adam
Rub
Loewy
some
put in
hamburger on
dog
her arm
bites
and-
for
yeah.
a reason, right? Because that seems to be a thing. So I'm with your team daughter. Like, hey, look, I mean, if something happens, you got an attorney that you could call the Loewy Law Firm at 512-280-0800 and tell them Anwar sent you. But sometimes people don't want dogs jumping on them, man. Like, I don't like dogs jumping on me, puppy or not. Like, get off of me. Like, I don't want none of that stuff. So some people just like their space. So you can go and force it on her, but some people are just a space kind of person. I'm team daughter. Tell that damn dog to get off me.
It isn't about a team here. It's just about I'm on team daughter too. But Ketch, what do you think, man? What do you think?
I think something like this will fix itself organically. I don't know that you need to take her to the feed store and force the encounter, just because you can't control the outcome of that. And if it were to go sideways for any reason, right? Like, she's already scared. And if trying to make it happen, something else were to happen that made her scared, I feel like you maybe take a step back, but she's 6. So she's going to have plenty of times over the course of her lifetime to be around other puppies and dogs. And I think you can naturally, knowing this now, right? You're aware of this thing that she has, that I think, without forcing it, I think in the coming days, weeks, and months, she can find herself around other dogs and puppies where this concern starts to dissipate a little bit. It just will. But I think that, I don't know. I don't want to micromanage the parenting here, because I don't know that you can make a wrong decision. I don't think you're going to screw up her life by doing this, but it sounds like it was for a 6-year-old, it sounds like it was fairly traumatic yesterday. And I don't know that I would put the 6-year-old in the exact same traumatic scene, just in the quest to make it less traumatic. If that makes sense.
Makes perfect
my
sense.
thoughts.
I was gonna say, Anwar, I wouldn't try to interrupt you earlier with the Loewy stuff, but it's funny. He literally has a big billboard like right next to this.
Got a big billboard everywhere.
Yeah.
Does.
Yeah.
It does.
I would love to see the billboard stats around the state of Texas, because I see them everywhere.
Oh yeah.
It's all throughout whatever deal he signed to be throughout the state of Texas. It's like, let's put one in every corner of the state.
It's an extensive deal.
Yes.
Well, because it's funny, because it started out where I would be like, hey, there's Adam Loewy. He's, Anwar sponsor. He's on Orange Bloods. And it was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that would be my wife's reaction. And now it's like, Jesus, there's another billboard. He's everywhere. Adam is taking over the state one billboard at a time. He is above the feed store. Is that what you're saying now?
Yeah. There's a billboard next to the feed store, and like it's an Adam Loewy Law Firm.
That could be like a message from God to listen to Anwar.
It could be.
The words are trying to tell you. Jason, what about you? What do you got from a parting shot standpoint?
Yeah, Adam's getting his money out of his sponsorship this week, isn't he? On Orange Bloods. Hey, speaking of
Alex's daughter, when it's all said.
Yeah, maybe. Talking about guys on Orange Bloods, and this wasn't my parting shot, but I interviewed Hodges Mitchell yesterday, former Texas running back. I think it's fair to call him a great. I mean, he was kind of sandwiched between Ricky Williams and Sed Benson, so people don't remember him as a great, but he really was if you look back statistically. But anyways, I talked to him yesterday. I'll have a kind of where are they now deal, probably my 3-2-1 Monday of next week. But he was an Orange Blood. I said, how did you know that I wanted to interview? And he goes, oh, I saw your post on Orange Blood. He's an Orange Blood subscriber. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, man. And second one I've done of those fairly recently. I did one with Blaine Irby. I guess it's been several months actually, but just really good to talk to those dudes, man. It's like guys that I covered, or Hodges I didn't cover as a recruit, but he was playing when I first kind of got into the media business. Blaine I covered as a recruit, got to know his family a little bit. So it's really always interesting to me, and I think people will find it interesting when I write the story, just to see how those guys are doing and how they're they're family men now and their lives are going well. And Hodges is working at UT, and he told me a story. He actually silently committed to Mac Brown at North Carolina.
Yep.
And then Mac, of course, ends up being his coach 6 months later at Texas, and and he's like, man, I just think it's like just the grace of God was looking out for me or something, and just changed his life. But a pretty cool story. And we'll have that next week. Feels like forever ago, but last Friday, Texas had their big recruiting pool party.
Don't talk recruiting.
I know, still have interviews, and they did help themselves with some guys, but Bryce Anderson's tomorrow and announcing tomorrow, and that's not going to go Texas's way, barring him waking up.
You're ruining it. See,
barring him waking
you're doing it.
I couldn't help myself. My other main parting shot is 1 week from today. My kids are back in school, man. It's been a year and a half. I got 4 of them. For those watching, 4 of them at home, high school, middle school, elementary school. And I was driving with my 10-year-old daughter, I think it was yesterday, and she looked at we drove by her school, and she goes, oh my, I can't believe I'll be there in 8 days or whatever. I was like, oh my gosh, it hasn't hit me. My kids are back in school after a year and a half of being at home. I will be getting up bright and early that morning, and I will be have that car running as soon as they wake up. Love having my kids around, but at some point there's a limit. So yes, school starts next Thursday, and looking forward to that day. So
same thought, Jason, crossed my mind. Hey, by the way, on the Hodges Mitchell thing, if I'm not mistaken, this is 24 years ago, I think, of how long ago it would have been since Hodges was a recruit. His dad, I think, played for North Carolina.
Florida State. His dad.
But he played for Mac or knew Mac or something.
Played with Mac. We talked about that. Played with Mac at Florida State. I'm giving away some of the interesting parts of the story that I'll have. But his dad transfers into Florida State as a running back. They had to move Mac Brown to fullback to accommodate him. And Hodges used to always talk to Mac about that. And I said, you're lucky Mac didn't hold a grudge because he got kicked out of the tailback spot into fullback because of your dad. But it was just, it was very interesting. He just loved North Carolina. He loved Notre Dame too. He was going to commit to Notre Dame, went on a visit up there, and just did not like Bob Davie, who's the head coach at the time. So that's when he ends up committing to North Carolina. And it's an interesting story. Again, he met with Mac. Mac Brown comes to do the in-home visit, and Cleve Bryant was with him. And he tells Mac, hey, I don't think I can go to North Carolina. It's just too far away. What do you think about UT? And Mac basically said, hey, if you're having those thoughts, you need to go to Texas. If you want to live in Texas, raise your family in Texas, you need to go to the University of Texas. This is when Mac's trying to do an in-home visit for North Carolina. And I asked Hodges, do you think Mac knew he was going to wind up at Texas or something? He goes, I don't think so at this point. But, listen, fans, when Mac was at Texas, especially towards the end of the year, fans threw a lot of crap at Mac because his wins and losses weren't what people were accustomed to. But you hear a story like that, and it just kind of reminds you of what kind of person Mac Brown is. Him helping out scholarships for people behind the scenes. It was a really interesting conversation with Hodges Mitchell. And then lo and behold, I find out Hodges lives a couple miles away from me in Leander, Texas. So he and I were like, hey man, let's go hook up and grab a bite to eat sometime. So it was just a fun conversation for me to hear the backstory. A little bro date. It'll be nice. A little bit. Kind of feels like it. Yeah, a little bit, man. So
I need some bro dates. I got to meet some people here in the Woodlands. All right, Anwar, parting shot. What you got?
May have a couple. So, this is usually around the time that people invite me to be a guest on their radio shows or podcasts to talk about the upcoming season. You know how many Big 12 radio shows or podcasts I've been invited to be on? 0. You know how many SEC podcasts I've been invited to be on or shows? I can't count them. No one wants to talk about the Big 12 anymore. In SEC, my numbers of followers are starting to grow. The podcast stuff is starting to grow. All that stuff. Big 12, not a single phone call. No one even wants to talk about it anymore. I'll be interested to know. It'd be interesting to see for this upcoming season how Texas fans start viewing success in the Big 12. Like, is there going to be all right, I want to make sure we go out and win it and beat OU and all these type of things, or it's going to be a shoulder shrug and say, this conference sucks. We're not going to be here anyway. So I don't know what this is going to look like, but I find it so fascinating that every couple of days, somebody is asking me to be a guest on their SEC station podcast. If I showed you, I went through, your DMs and people don't follow you. There's a separate folder, and I finally went through that and I saw it's like 10 radio stations that I never got back to. They probably think I'm an asshole. I just didn't see all the requests. It was all SEC. No one wants to ask me about the Big 12. So anyway, that's kind of what my party shot. My other party shot is this might be the most unprepared I've ever been for a fantasy football season. I fully hope that I can win maybe 3 games, but
we need a draft order, Catch. Let's get.
I will do that this weekend.
Okay. Yeah, if you do that, maybe I'll get a chance to start.
That'll kickstart everybody's preparations.
Yeah,
I need something because I've got nothing. Back in the day when I didn't have kids. To Jason's point, I didn't have kids and just me. Like I was like really into this thing. Now, man, I got kids. We got our YouTube stuff that we're working on, normal stuff. Like the last thing I'm thinking about is Nick Foles and can he go to another team? Like I don't even know, man. So anyway,
you shouldn't dedicate 1 second of thought to Nick Foles if you're thinking about fantasy football.
It's Austin's own. So anyway, that's it. Those are my only parting shots. The SEC fantasy team is guaranteed to suck this year.
I'm telling you, Anwar, you're going to win 11 games this year.
There's no way. If I win 11, I can't even give you like the top 5 in each position.
I mean, really, it almost always comes down to, did you nail your first 2 picks or did you have bad luck? Right? Because, if you tell me right now that my 2nd round pick tears his ACL in week 2, that's going one hand. Usually you can be average as you can possibly be, but if you hit on your first 2 picks and don't somehow, find a way to screw it. Now, obviously depth and hitting on picks better than that, or everybody does a reasonably okay job. If you got a couple of war daddies that you can lean on, you'll be all right.
I'm gonna go back to I'm just gonna go back to drafting Aaron Rodgers in the first round. Like I'm just gonna just like it's 2017. I'm just gonna go and just keep drafting him. That's the only thing that ever worked for me.
I mean, look, you can't control if Adrian Peterson gets essentially blackballed off his team for beating his kid. What are you gonna do?
Anwar, we've got a dude in the league that I'm commissioner of, and he shows up at the draft. Homer, Catch, Homer well.
Oh yeah.
Homer's a little bit of a goofball. We love him, but he shows up at the draft every year with a freaking fantasy football magazine that he buys. And I'm like, who buys magazines when that shit's so outdated and you get free lists on the internet? He shows up with a magazine every year and we always make fun of him and he always does really well, man. So those magazines are printed like 3 months prior to the draft, but somehow it works out for him. So just go get yourself a magazine at HEB and you'll be good.
All right, well, thank you.
I mean, just take Alex's ranking.
Yeah. I print one up the day of the draft, dude. And
roster watch cheat sheet, stay right to it. And
you'll be swindling me at every turn. At least
you're at that point. Look, 25% of the league is roster watch. So
it's true.
You're at least sniping. At least one of those dudes will be in your division when it's all.
I sniped Alex so many times last year that still didn't make the playoffs.
Well, Alex, I haven't won it in 10 years, so what the hell can I say? But you still haven't won it, right?
No, I've been the bridesmaid. Not 3 of the last 4 years I've been to the championship. But man, I don't know who invited Bond Lounge Horn into this damn league. But that if we would have invited that dude into the league, but he's
sorry about that.
What's his name?
It was because Jason wouldn't take the spot. God, I don't even ask him anymore.
That guy's a killer, man. Like he was they were trying to get together a high stakes league on the site. I think $500 to $1,000 buy-in, and I was like, I'd be down. And then he jumps in and says he wants in. I'm like, nope, I don't need to be in another league with you, man. I'm not interested. Like I'm not interested.
He enjoys taking our money. Alex, you just learned the first real trick to fantasy football success. Talk up your opponents like they're God, and you will jinx them into oblivion.
Anwar's taking the Lou Holtz approach. That's what he's doing over there.
Oh yeah,
potty mouthing his team before he even drafts it. Yep.
I do it every week. McComas, more than anybody, is acutely aware of my jinx powers, always try to offset my jinx powers by beating me to the punch. It doesn't make my team do any better, but I can jinx the hell out of everybody else. My final parting shot is stay tuned on the NIL front. We've got some more announcements coming, more football announcements coming. I think you guys are going to like them. And I think that it's been really cool to talk to a number of these athletes across all sports and how, this thing is a win for them in a lot of ways. And it's been fun to participate. So starting with the first Jordan Whittington video that we had earlier in the week, we will talk to him on Saturday morning, bright and early, because that's when it fits into his schedule the best after the first practice. But we'll start having more players be a part of the team. And I think the content's going to be fantastic. And I think that it'll give us an advantage that we haven't had as a website in the previous 20 years. This will be a brave new world that we're in. And I just got to say, it's been a lot of fun being involved in early on. And hopefully it stays that way. So that's my parting shot. For myself, Anwar, Alex, and Jason, thanks for watching. Of course, we'll do this again next week. One of these days, we got to get the newbies on. Just, I was thinking about it, and I was like, football recruiting, basketball. No, those guys can wait for another day.
It'll look like Hollywood Squares in here, man.
It will. Shout out to the old Hollywood Squares TV show.
Yeah.
Kind of like that back in the day. But until next time, we'll see you later. You guys take care of each other.